Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parsha class of the Temple Institute. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm again podcasting from my home in Malodumim due to the coronavirus semi-quarantine situation going on here in Israel and in much of the world. Of course, we all hope that this will end soon, but as long as it lasts, we must do what we can to make sense of the events happening to us and around us. This includes understanding the situation both from a scientific and health standpoint, as well as a societal and psychological standpoint. Included in the latter is the matter of spirituality and what this all means in the grand scheme of things. It happens that currently we have very little understanding of any of these standpoints. So we are going to focus on the spiritual, since this is where religions tend to focus. This week's Parsha, for better or worse, happens to be particularly apropos for our current situation. It is a so-called double Parsha, meaning that two weekly Parshas are read on one Shabbat to make the Parsha system conform with the calendar year. The two Parshas are called Tazria-Metzora. The first refers to the producing sexual seed, while the second is commonly taken to refer to the dreaded biblical plague of leprosy. The actual word for leprosy, tzar'at, comes up many times in both of these Parshas. Metzora, our second Parsha, is a derivative of this word, which technically means the one who has tzar'at, or leprosy, or the leper. It happens that the translation of this keyword tzar'at as leprosy is quite controversial. The original Greek translation of the Bible indeed translates it this way, and this is the meaning that is commonly understood by most everyone who studies the Bible. However, owing to many features of the disease, both in the Bible itself and in rabbinic teachings on the Bible, it has come to mean many other things that have little or nothing to do with leprosy. Rabbinic authorities tend to stress the spiritual aspects of the disease, and it has been frequently explained as a divine punishment for gossip and talebearing. Though there is little in these parshas to support this understanding, it has remained the explanation of choice amongst Orthodox Jews. But we are going to stick with an understanding that is more faithful to the actual words in the Torah. It is unquestionably describing a growth of sorts that can affect the skin, the hair, garments, and even walls of houses. There is no question that leprosy does not occur on the walls of houses and likely has little or to no effect on garments. However, the skin and the hair the skin and hair conditions definitely fit with some effects of leprosy. So leprosy it remains. In all likelihood, the Torah is describing a whole series of growths that we now know come from a variety of unrelated sources, including molds, fungi, bacteria, and possibly viruses. It may include such common problems as eczema and psoriasis. The Torah simply combines them all into one collective category called Tzaraat. The details of this disease or growth in its many forms is highly complicated in the Torah and too complex to go into in this format. Suffice it to say that there are various skin, hair, clothes, or wall discolorations that may either spread or change color or simply go away. There are various methods of determining whether or not the disease is considered to be a problem. From a medical standpoint, it doesn't make all that much sense. But then again, nothing made all that much sense from a medical standpoint until about a century or two ago. Until then, scientists knew little to nothing about bacteria, molds, or viruses. This is the Torah's attempt at explaining a disease of a completely unknown source in words that could be understood by people thousands of years ago. Leprosy is a somewhat contagious disease that originates from a bacteria and affects mainly the skin. It can go inside the body and wreak havoc, but it can also cause major problems if it remains on the skin. The victim can undergo a lack of pain awareness, which can result in the loss of limbs. Since it is of bacterial origin, it can easily be cured today. In the past, however, it was a terrible disease that decreed a lifetime of isolation on its victims, owing to its perceived or actual contagiousness. This last point is where we shall focus. According to the Bible, a priest must examine a priest or a Kohen, must examine the area where the growth is found and put the victim through various stages of quarantine. The first stage is 1 week, which may be followed by a second week. There are various treatments of shaving the area around the disease, or of cleaning a garment, or taking apart the walls of the house. The primary treatment, both in the Bible and for thousands of years after, was essentially quarantine. Leper colonies, both within populated areas in many parts of the world and on highly isolated islands, were an unfortunate feature of life in many parts of the world before the 20th century. The lepers had to live among themselves with little to no contact with the outside world for months, years, or even decades. It was a truly tragic fate for those who did nothing wrong other than perhaps having made known or unknown contact with someone who already had leprosy. To have to spend the rest of one's life in one of these colonies seems to us today to be a fate worse than death. But such was life for many before a cure was found. There are a couple of crucial verses that constitute the Torah's version of this fate. Here I quote, "The leper, or whatever condition they may have had, that has the plague shall rend their clothes, and their hair shall not be cut, and their upper lip shall be covered, and they shall call out, 'Unclean, unclean.' For all the days that the plague is there, the person shall be unclean and shall dwell alone outside of the encampment." While it is unclear what exactly not cutting the hair or covering the upper lip are supposed to do, there is no question that the fate of being self-declared unclean and dwelling alone outside the populated area bear a strong resemblance to the way that lepers were classically treated. There is no getting around this point. We wish to focus on certain aspects of these two verses. The first is this business of having to call out, "Unclean, unclean." The second is the requirement to dwell alone outside of the population. What was this supposed to accomplish, being as the disease was seen in the Bible as exactly what it was, a disease? Dealing with the second question first, it is obvious that the main advantage to the isolation was preventing the disease from being carried to someone else. There is no indication in the Torah that it was supposed to cure the victim. If anything, it was all those other things like not cutting the hair, rending the clothes, or perhaps covering the upper lip that may have done something for the victim. But this is really unclear. The isolation seems to be entirely for the benefit of those with whom the victim may have otherwise had contact. As far as the first issue, calling out unclean, unclean, this perhaps had a similar purpose. Simply speaking, the leper was warning others to stay clear and avoid close contact. This is the way almost everybody who reads this verse understands things. While this may strike us today as a harsh and merciless fate for one who was unfortunate enough to contract the disease to begin with, it seems that this fate was necessary to protect society as a whole. Both of these prominent impositions on the leper thus seem to have a common goal, that of protecting others from the leper. It is difficult to avoid making a connection between this ancient biblical disease and the restrictions placed around it and the situation in much of the world today. Coronavirus, while much is known about it, there is an equal or greater amount of things that are unknown about it. We know that it is a virus and that it is highly contagious and that it can kill. We believe that it came from bats in some uncertain way and that a way will be found to contain it and prevent it from plaguing humanity. We know that it can arise with certain symptoms, but that it can also come without any symptoms. We can only speculate on how to stop it with anything short of a vaccine, or how society as a whole should act in the face of its devastation. We don't know if it will come back to haunt us in the future, or if the methods we are using currently to deal with it are entirely adequate or even necessary. We are in the dark on many aspects of this disease. Coronavirus, however, is unlike leprosy in many ways. Aside from the technical point that it comes from a virus instead of a bacteria, there are many other differences that are quite important. Owing to the state of the world today, coronavirus is having vast political implications on the local, national, and international level. It is severely affecting economies across the world and leaving many bereft of any financial support. It has taken tens of thousands of lives and left its permanent mark on countless families. Perhaps worse than all of this, we don't know what the state of the world and our lives will be after all this is over. The primary common element these two diseases have is this thing about keeping others from getting hit with it. Social distancing and wearing a mask, both of which bear striking resemblance to the restrictions associated with tzar'at or leprosy in the Torah, may turn out to be permanent or long-lasting results of coronavirus. There may even be a modern-day version of calling out unclean, unclean. It may turn out instead to be a way of declaring clean, clean for those who possess the much-desired antibodies against coronavirus. If there is anything we can take from these parshas that can help us deal with our current plague, it is this idea of protecting others from our own, perhaps unknown germs. Nobody wants to be in quarantine, but it may be necessary for our own good and that of others around us. Nobody wants to be alone, but sometimes we must be alone. While these realizations do little good for those who must spend time in quarantine, just knowing that this is a repeating fate that rides throughout history, including in the Bible, may be a partial source of spiritual support. We are not as in control of our lives and our fates as we would like and as we tend to believe. There is much about life that is entirely out of our hands. If anything, coronavirus, like Tzaraat or leprosy, should teach us at this vital point, should teach us this vital point. We can send people to the moon and plumb to the depths of the structure of matter. We can cure many diseases and improve the lives of billions with better foods, medicines, and all kinds of other wonders of the modern world. But we are still subject to the whims and powers of little things that we cannot see or feel, which can bring the entire world down to its collective knees in a matter of a few weeks. Human beings are great and wonderful. They are selfish and terrible. We control much, but we don't control all. When all is said and done, all we can really do is recognize that as great and as powerful as we believe ourselves to be, there is a power greater than us. Shabbat Shalom.